Hey guys, welcome back to Pop Culture with Pat. It's that time of the week again. It's time to talk about Yellowjackets. We are on episode 7 now, which is crazy. I can't believe we're almost already done with this season. This week's episode is called Burial. And as usual, guys, if you are new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button as well as the bell button next to it. That way you get notifications for all my new videos. You don't miss any of these. Make sure to check out my cast interviews that I've done with several members of the cast for Yellowjackets as well. And this is going to be a spoiler-filled recap breakdown. So just a heads up, if you haven't seen the episode, make sure you watch that. Or if you don't care about spoilers, feel free to continue on, but without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about episode 7. So the episode opens up and we actually get a little Nirvana, Something in the Way playing in the background, and you just see the snow is continuing to come down. We get a shot of the cabin of the outside and you actually see that they are officially snowed in. There is quite a bit of snow around them, so everyone is stuck inside the cabin at this particular moment and they can't get out. And then we see Ty. She tries to get Shauna to drink some water because she's just kind of laying there after what had happened in the previous episode, which is understandable. And Shauna just isn't having any of it and she just kind of rolls over. So a very eerie opening to the beginning of this episode. But then Lottie, she looks outside and all of a sudden the snow just randomly kind of stops out of nowhere. And they are finally able to, they open up the door and they start digging themselves outside. You see several of the Yellowjackets outside digging like a pathway around. And then we see Shauna, she's walking along and we end up finding out that she has her dead baby in her arms, brings the baby over to, finds a pile of rocks, and then buries the baby under these rocks. And then we get the intro of the episode, which we get another new version of the intro again. So that's interesting. We had the regular version. We also have the Alanis Morissette version that we had a couple episodes back. And now we have this version as well. So do you guys think that we are going to get any more versions of the intro before the season ends? We only got a couple episodes left, but we've already gotten a couple different versions this season. So curious if you guys think we'll get at least one more. After the intro, we then have our present-day Yellowjackets. They're emptying their pockets and belongings into one of the bins at Lottie's compound because they're checking in. And it's kind of funny here because Ty ends up looking at Misty and Nat and asks them if they have joined a cult since the last time that they've seen them, which is a very fair question. However, Nat ends up telling the rest of the group that she was actually going to kill herself before Lottie was the one that ended up finding her. In the 90s timeline then, we see Ty, she's crying, and Van sees that, so she asks her what's wrong. Ty mentions that she just felt like the baby was really going to make it, and Van mentions that she did too, but even if the baby did end up surviving, everyone is starving, Shauna is starving, so how long would that baby have really lasted? And Van says that she feels like it's time for everyone to really wake up. And Ty kind of looks at her and says, that doesn't really sound like you. And same thing for me watching the episode. I was like, that's kind of weird. Because so far up to this point, Van's been the one that's kind of been like a strict believer in Lottie and everything that's been going on with her. But then Van, she ends up mentioning that she's survived multiple things that should have killed her at this point, which is very true. I mean, she had the plane crash, which should have probably died there. Had the wolves attacking her, that she probably should have died there. And she's survived all of those, so she's thought that that has kind of meant something and that she had some kind of purpose, but she's starting to really doubt that now. Back in the present day, we then have Lottie. She tells each of the ladies to pick a treatment that they have to do, and Van is kind of like, yeah, no, I'm not really about this, but then Ty mentions that she's going to do renewal. Shauna picks self-care, Van ends up picking forage, and Misty ends up getting guidance. So Shauna ends up getting put in charge of keeping this baby goat alive for the day, and so now it makes sense why the goat picture was on the clue sheet for this week. Definitely makes more sense now. But she thinks that she's basically just going to get attached to this goat for the day, and then at the end of the day, she's going to have to kill it. So then we go to Coach Ben in the 90s, who's staring outside the window when we get what looks like another one of his memories with Paul, who's going to answer the phone. However, Paul is on the phone talking to someone when he's looking at Ben and he says he isn't ready, and then he ends up hanging up the phone. He then tells Ben they need to talk and says, "Where do you think you are, Ben? You had to know you couldn't stay here forever. This wasn't meant to be your hiding place." And then Ben kind of wakes up out of there, walks outside the cabin, and screams for Paul. And then Ty, she's out there with Van. She hears this and she kind of just looks at him and goes, "Are you okay?" And Coach goes, yeah, I'm fine. But clearly he's not, and you can tell because he looks like he's crying. So then we go to the present day where we have Lisa and Misty. They go into this room where Lisa tells Misty to get into this water tank, and you can tell that Misty is a little skeptical about getting into it, in which I don't blame her at all, because it's a little weird that she's going to be in here completely by herself in this dark tank. And so she's like, yeah, well, first I want to go to the bathroom. And of course, when she goes to go to the bathroom, she ends up walking and leaving. From there, we cut back to the 90s where we see Misty. She overhears Mari, Akilah, and Jen talking. Akilah mentions that Misty was amazing when it came to helping delivering the baby, and she really kept her cool. And you can tell Misty hearing that, that makes her very happy. But quickly right after that happens, Mari speaks up and says that, no, I think that Misty is a lot more psycho than we actually thought, and I think that she actually did something to Crystal. She did try to poison Coach before when they were in love, and then, now that it stopped snowing, wouldn't you be out there looking for your best friend if you really cared about them? And these are valid points, Mari. I do have to say that. Those are very valid points. So everyone comes back into the cabin, and we see Coach, and he's over in the corner, and we see him shaving his face. So he's going to be clean shaven now, which I just thought was interesting after everything that's kind of going on for him to be doing that, and that'll tie into later on in the episode, but we'll get there in a little bit. And then Misty ends up telling everyone that now that it stopped snowing, she wants to go out and look for Crystal. And when she mentioned this, Mari looks over at Akilah. Akilah kind of gives her a look. And it's like, yeah, clearly Misty is like, all right, I gotta do something so that way I can throw these guys off my trail. And Coach ends up saying that's a good idea because Javi was out there for a couple of months. And so maybe Crystal could survive a couple days. But then Melissa says, what if the wilderness took her? What if it took the baby too? And then Jen says, maybe it'll give us something back in return. Akilah mentions, that it did make the blizzard stop, but then Lottie says it doesn't work like that. It doesn't trade. It gives us what we wanted, and we wanted Shauna to live. You then see the group, they do one of their prayer circles again. They all gather around. This time you do see Coach in there, which I thought was kind of interesting. He gets in there, but I'm almost positive. I tried to watch it again a second time, and it didn't look like, because they were all saying, we hear the wilderness and it hears us, and it didn't look like Coach was saying anything, though, which isn't really surprising because just everything that we've seen so far up to this point in this season. And so a bunch of the Yellowjackets end up going outside to try and go look for Crystal, but then we see Jen and Melissa, they're inside the cabin still, and they're having a conversation where they kind of say, all right, if we end up finding Crystal and she is dead, they kind of hint at, should we go ahead and eat her? And Melissa says, it would be kind of disrespectful to the wilderness if we didn't, we let that meat basically go to waste. But they kind of wrap it up by saying, but, we hope that she's okay. And they leave, but you see that Misty ended up overhearing them talking. And so she goes outside. And then you see Shauna, she ends up getting the blanket that Lottie ended up making her with a symbol on it, grabs it from Van, takes it, and throws it into the fire. So Lottie, Ty, Misty, Mari, and Akilah are outside. They're over by the area where the tree stump is, where Lottie tells the rest of them that her and Ty, they're going to catch up in a minute. Lottie says to Ty that you were the one that was able to locate Javi when he was missing, and so maybe you can do that again this time. But Ty explains that ever since she's been doing the prayer circles and the things with Lottie's group, that she hasn't been sleepwalking and that the other her is gone. But Lottie looks at her and says, no, that isn't the case. So then in the present day, we see Ty, she goes up to Lottie and she tells her that she's sleepwalking again and that she needs help. She's worried that her other self is trying to hurt other people. Lottie says that might not be the case. She might just be tired of being suppressed and doesn't want to be anymore, and that other part of her is always going to be a part of Ty, in the future. Then we go to Misty and Shauna. So Misty finds Shauna in the woods. Shauna has lost her goat, so she's trying to find the goat, but she explains to Misty that at the end of the day, she thinks that Lottie is just going to have her kill the goat anyways, and Misty kind of makes a joke. It's like, well, you can just pretend that the goat is Adam, basically, and yeah, Shauna doesn't appreciate that joke too much. Shauna tells Misty that she doesn't think of killing as a joke like Misty does, and basically calls Misty a serial killer, which in the end, Misty doesn't actually really deny either, which I thought was interesting because that's been a theory that a lot of us have thought that Misty is in fact a serial killer. But Shauna eventually ends up finding her goat, walks away, and then someone from Lottie's group ends up coming to Misty and tells her to go back because Lisa's waiting for her by the water tank. Back in the 90s, we then see Misty, Akilah, and Mari looking for Crystal when all of a sudden Misty fakes to be upset about, looking for Crystal and worried they're going to find her and she's going to look like Jackie did. And you can tell that Mari isn't really buying it, but Akilah, being the nice person that she is, she says, hey, don't worry about it. You can go back. We'll continue looking for Crystal. And Misty's like, okay, thank you so much. And then we quickly cut to Coach, who's, I'm assuming at this point, looking for Crystal before he quickly falls, trips, and eats shit in the snow. We then go to Shauna, who we see going to the meat shack, and she goes in there, looks where Jackie's body used to be, and she calls out, basically begging for Jackie to appear, but she doesn't. My question is for you guys, do you think, so we got a couple more episodes left, do you think that Shauna is going to see Jackie again before the season finale for season 2? I'm thinking we probably will, but I don't know. I'm curious that now maybe that her body's gone, maybe we won't see her, but I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are, if we will or if we won't see her by season's end. And then that transitions, we go back to present day where Shauna, she has the goat, she brings it back to Lottie's people, saying that she's worried because she thinks the goat might have ate some of the rope and she wants to make sure the goat's okay, but Lottie's people tell her that the goat is under her watch for the day, so they can't do anything about it. So Shauna gets frustrated. She's like, all right, cool, then I'm just going to go ask Lottie then instead. And so she goes up to Lottie, and when she's talking to Lottie, Lottie explains, I'm not going to have you end up killing this goat. The reason why I do this, I give a person something innocent to watch over to provide them with more clarity. And we've seen this before. We saw Lisa when she took the goldfish and gave it to Nat to watch to the day. She wanted her to watch over something innocent other than just herself. And so Shauna, she's talking to Lottie and she tells her that she's always kept Callie at arm's length just for fear of her dying. And so clearly we can tell that Shauna's still very much dealing with the trauma of losing her first child back there in the wilderness. So then after this, we see Misty. She finally gets into the water tank, and this is when things in the episode get really fucking trippy. She starts seeing this purple light, she sees these flashes of the ocean and different creatures in the ocean, and then sees flashes of Walter. And then Misty sees Quigula and Walter dancing, doing like this fucking performance in her head, and we finally get that clip of Misty that we've seen in the intro for many of the episodes where she's kind of like laughing, looking around, kind of have these crazy faces. So we finally see that clip in the season. And while Misty's watching this performance, you start seeing a couple things floating around her head. One of them is, which I believe the needle that she killed Jessica Roberts with, and then I believe the other thing I want to say is the black box that she ended up destroying. I'm pretty sure. And then Misty goes up to the human version of Quiglio, which I know a lot of people were wondering when we were going to see the human version because there were some behind the scene photos I believe posted of this person. So we finally get to see them in this episode. Goes up to Quiglio and asks, do people just see someone desperate for love and a murderer? And Quiglio goes, no, you are not a murderer. You are a closer, Misty. So then from there, we see in the same weird world that they're in, this vision or whatever, that Misty and Walter, they're on the telephone where all of a sudden Walter says something, and I'm pretty sure that's Morse code. I don't know Morse code personally, but I think that's what they're kind of doing there. Tell me if I'm wrong, though, but I believe that's what they're doing, and I don't know what it translates to, so if you guys know, but at one point it ends up forming into like a heart or whatever, and then Misty ends up waking up out of her little dream state in the water tank. So Misty, she wakes up out of the water tank, and she calls Walter on the phone that's in the compound, and she tells Walter that you were right about the thing. Now, I'm assuming the thing about her being a murderer, that she killed Adam. I'm pretty sure that's the thing that she's referring to there. And she just explains that, it's hard for her to open up and to trust people. And, she just kind of like apologizes for everything. And then she gets ready to hang up and she goes, no, you hang up. No, you hang up. No, you hang up. And I was just sitting there watching this like, oh, fucking okay, Misty. Clearly off the deep end here. From there, we jump back into the 90s timeline where we see Misty. She climbs down to the area where Crystal's body was. She goes around, she starts digging for the body in the snow and can't find the body. Now, maybe there was like a lot of snow that fell, so maybe she just, they made it seem like she looked everywhere, but maybe she just missed it. But if the body is missing, where do you think the body went? We haven't really seen a whole lot of animals other than like moose and stuff like that. You know, the wolves, season 1? Do you think an animal could have got it? Do you think something else got it? Where do you think the body went? But then as Misty is climbing back up from where she was looking for Crystal's body, she's climbing up and she sees Coach. So she kind of waits there for a second because doesn't want him to see her. However, she notices then that Coach is getting ready to jump off the ledge. And so she gets up, she yells at him, says, hey, what's going on? He looks at her and actually asks if Misty can push him off the ledge, which is kind of ironic considering what happened with her and Crystal, even though I know technically she didn't push Crystal off, but she did kind of make Crystal back up and fall off the ledge. So I thought that was interesting, but Misty says no, she won't do that, and that the group actually still needs Coach. So Misty, she starts just thinking of things to try and help, pull Coach away from the ledge. She says that if you jump off, then we're just going to eat you, and he's like, fine, go ahead and do it, I don't care. She says that, she'll tell everyone once they're rescued, tell everyone about their love story, say that he tried to impregnate her, tried to impregnate everyone else, and then finally she says, I'll tell everyone that you were gay, and he looks at Misty and says, go ahead and do it. And so it was at this point that I honestly thought that Coach was going to jump off the ledge and we were going to have another major death here. But Misty at this point, she ends up breaking down, talking about the baby, just saying that she can't have another death on her hands. And it's at this point that Ben finally decides to step away from the ledge. Then in the present day, we see Ty. She's outside by the fire when she ends up running into Van. And she says something along the lines that she can't believe that she is here again, which I just thought was kind of an interesting line thrown in there. And then Van and Ty end up kissing. Ty ends up apologizing to Van though. And Van says, well, hey, I can't wait for you forever. And Ty knows, no, I totally understand. And Van knows, no, I mean, literally, I only have a limited amount of time because I actually have cancer and only have a few months to live. So that kind of came out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting that. Now, with this, though, with her saying that she has cancer, she only has a couple months to live, something in me, I just have this feeling that we aren't going to lose adult Van. Something is going to happen in the present day timeline, whether it has to do with Lottie or something, that the cancer will get cured or will disappear in some way because of the wilderness, because of the Antler Queen, something along those lines. I don't think they would introduce us to adult Van and then have her killed off so quickly. I would be kind of surprised, but I'm curious what you guys kind of think of that situation. Do you think that we are going to lose adult Van this soon? And then we see Misty, she comes outside and she tells Ty and Van to come inside. Then we go to Lottie, who she's visiting her therapist again when she tells her therapist that more of them are there, and so this is just more proof that the wilderness wants all of them to be together. Her therapist then tells her that when she was with these women previously, that she was her truest, most authentic self, but Lottie is worried because when they were together, they hurt each other and they did bad things to each other. Lottie then goes, are you telling me what I think you're saying? And then we see her therapist is actually Antler Queen and goes, you tell me, does a hunt that has no violence feed anyone? But then you actually realize that no one is actually there with Lottie and that she is all by herself, which I know some of you have been talking about this on the Facebook forums, the couple pages that I'm a part of. So shout out to you guys that called that out, that the therapist actually wasn't there. I thought that she might have been just where we did see the therapist, but we clearly find out that that is not the case. So Lottie has basically been talking to herself this whole time. So then we see Nat, she's kind of getting everything all set up and she wants the rest of the ladies to talk about, what they learned today, which is very un-Nat-like. And Shauna kind of convinces Nat and the rest of them convince Nat to just kind of hang out with everyone and just kind of relax for a little bit. Lottie, she then ends up coming into the room, and at first, she comes in and she says, I think that all you guys should just leave, after experiencing what she just did. But again, the rest of the group convinces her to sit down and kind of for all of them just to hang out and be together. Nat ends up asking Misty about Walter and if he's Misty's boyfriend, and Misty explains that they met online, they haven't really defined their relationship yet, and then she brings up the fact that Nat slept with Kevin at one point. But then Misty ends up bringing up the first summer that they were all stranded out there together, and Van and Ty, they kind of shut that shit down real quick, but then Nat actually says to the group, how much do you guys actually remember from our time out there? And she mentions that, she remembers some things, but some things are kind of hazy, and some of the other members say the same thing, which I kind of thought that was an interesting line as well. I don't know if that's something that's going to play into a future part of the story. What do you guys think on that? Then we see Van, she gets up and Ty goes over to her. She tells her that she knows a specialist, but then Van kind of just brushes her off and they all start dancing around with each other. Then we go back to the 90s where everyone is inside the cabin, and all of a sudden Shauna hears Misty humming the song that she heard in her dream where everyone ended up eating her baby. And so she asks Misty where she heard that song, and Misty, she's just kind of puzzled. She doesn't know what's going on. And Shauna kind of calls her out and says that you killed my baby, goes over, punches her in the face. Lottie ends up stepping in front, and then Shauna ends up hitting Lottie as well. Lottie then says to Shauna she knows that there's a lot of pain and that she has to let it out. And then she just lets Shauna beat the ever-living shit out of her. Shauna just starts going to town as everyone is just standing there watching this happen. And so now we know from several episodes ago where we had that vision of someone, it was like a quick vision of someone covered in blood. It was hard to tell who it was. Well, that was Lottie, because after Shauna gets done beating the shit out of her, her face is just all puffed up, covered in blood all over the place. And it was just blew my mind that everyone was just sitting there just watching this happen. And then the episode ends up ending where we're in the present day, where all of a sudden someone come and tells Lottie that one of her members has an urgent call from someone, and it's for Shauna. Shauna goes inside, answers the phone. It's Jeff. And Jeff, you can tell that he's trying to be careful with what he's saying over the phone, but basically tells Shauna that the police have found Adam's body in the park. My first question was, how did this happen? But I am wondering, because earlier on in the episode, when Misty, she called Walter, noticed this happen afterwards, do you think that maybe Walter tipped the police off? I'm wondering a couple things. If Walter is part of the FBI, some undercover agent, something along those lines, or maybe in some way he is actually related to Adam in some kind of way too. That could be possible. I don't know. I want to hear what your guys' thoughts are on the end of the episode. We clearly know that shit is about to go down. If you guys have watched some of my interviews with the cast members, a lot of them said that they were looking forward to episode 8, which is next week's episode. So I think we are going to have a lot of shit happen in that episode. So I can't wait. But yeah, as always, I want to hear what your guys' thoughts and theories are on the episode. So please let me know down below in the comments. Again, if you guys are new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button as well as the bell button next to it. That way you get notifications for all my new videos. If you can, please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps out the video, helps out the channel. So thank you guys so much for everyone who likes the video, who comments on it. It really means a lot to me, guys. I do still at least have one more interview for you guys coming up in a couple weeks-ish. And hopefully maybe more than just the one, but I know I at least got the one more. So stay tuned for that. And as always, guys, please make sure to check back for more Pop Culture with Pat.